Hello there and welcome to a new video for Age of Wonders 4. In this one I got 10 advanced tips and tricks for the Barbarian Culture. So we're going to talk about the things that make this culture great and the things that you need to know to get the most out of your builds. So let's start out with number 1. I want to talk spider mounts. It's pretty common knowledge by now, but if the trend has passed you by, here goes. Spider mounts are extremely synergistic with the barbarians. Technically, you could take other mounts too, but I think nothing hits as hard as the spider. That's because of several reasons. For one, the spiders have a 1 hex AoE nuke that's fairly powerful. For level 1, right available from the get-go, on your Pathfinders at least, it's super powerful. It has a pretty high cooldown, but the really amazing thing is your tier 2 archers get that thing too. So they gain extra HP out of that. They count for whatever it's worth as cavalry. That can be really good for terms of buffing, like I use it here with the animal kinship thing. And on top of that, they also gained that AoE immobilization nuke, and that is a really massive thing because your hard-hitting archers can now keep melee guys on distance, and that is really good. So yeah, spider mounts, they're amazing on barbarians. They're amazing for everybody, but on barbarians I think the synergy is wild. So number 2. The scout raiding party. So the thing we all know about the barbarians is that our scouts are able to build outposts, so they can settle down wherever they want. The real fun part is that with the barbarians you have access to skirmishers, which happen to have 40 movement points. Sure, they're still a little bit slower than your regular Pathfinder with 48, but the fun part is your units can really move fast, and you can also slap a little bit of camouflage on these guys and you have a massive stealthed raiding party. You can clear out nodes with that if you don't mind the loss of XP, but behind the enemy line plundering is one wonderful thing you can do. And if you opted into the spider mounts, it even goes more wild when you are able to do 1 scout, 5 furies, and off they go with 48 move points. They are so darn fast, and it's really amazing how much ground you can cover. And if your build is somewhat accustomed to deal damage with archers, well, the AI has to deal with that. It's you'll at least rip a hole into their lines with that before going down yourself. It's a lot of fun. The scout raiding party is a massive thing that I personally think is barbarian special. So number 3 goes pretty into a similar direction, or can be also used. I want to talk about the Ritual of Alacrity and its synergy with Forced March, because that's not so obvious in the first place. Let's talk about Ritual of Alacrity quickly. So this is something available for your outposts and cities. It costs gold, doesn't get shown here per se, but the units require gold to pull that thing off. They restore HP, movement points, and remove the exhaustion from forced marches. So this is going places. Hear me out. So first, you can activate Forced March to regain all of your movement points again. You lose HP, you gain that exhaustion debuff, pretty wicked stuff, and it also costs you mana, but you can't change that. But the real sweet deal is you move with that army on their last lag in the domain of your city, then you cast a Ritual of Alacrity, and then regain all of your movement points again and keep moving. This is one massive synergy, so don't sleep on Forced March when you're playing barbarians, because no other culture in the game can utilize this stuff as good as these, because they have just a button which basically says ignore drawbacks of Forced March. Here, take my gold. And that's really powerful, and nobody else can pull that off, so worth knowing, I think. Number 4, the Berserker Cheese. So Berserkers are really amazing, guys. They are your most hard-hitting stuff in your regular culture's roster, and they come with that nifty little Berserker's Rage. When they go low, and unless they are stunned, they won't die. So this is something that I really want to point out, how much shenanigans you can play with that. So all you need to do is pick up some tomes, be it either the Tome of Warding, really low effort and really high return, and plop a Mark of Invulnerability on that guy while you're retreating him, and then heal him up and fight again. So this is only one method. There's plenty of methods in here that give your units the ability to just live longer, and whatever longevity boost you want to apply on your berserkers will pay off so stupidly good, because they have that get out of jail free card with steadfast, and all you need to do is add one or two more ideas than I have showed you here already, and it becomes really hard for the AI to kill off your berserkers. And this is something I really admire about these guys, because they are quite hard-hitting dudes, and I love these guys for what they're worth in the roster. So play around the steadfast thing, learn to love it and skill around it, and you notice how much heavy lifting your berserkers can do in any fight, because they got that wicked heavy charge strike that's normally only exclusive to cavalry. Now then, number 5, I want to talk about the Shrine of the Wargod. So this is one building you can build in every city, and it's so easy to overlook how massively good it is. So for one, it buffs up your units when they're inside the domain. 10 morale is nothing to sneeze at, but the Wargod's aggression trait is so good. It's 2 damage more for every unit printed in that city which has that thing. So basically, when you're playing barbarians, try to get that Shrine of the Wargod down ASAP in your main troop production site, because 2 points of damage more, they do matter so much. When you consider that the baseline damage is 10, that's a whopping 20% more damage on your baseline tier 1 units, and everybody loves that. And most importantly, it synergizes with percentual bonuses again, so really, this building is something that I overlooked for a very long time, and when I noticed how darn good it is, I really didn't understand myself why I did overlook it. So Shrine of the Wargod, big stuff. Number 6. The next thing on my list is to talk about how much importance forests are playing to your troop production if you want to. So the barbarians have access to the Forest of Stakes, and this is one thing that is, for one, a super powered forester, so it's always worth building that guy. But if you have a city available with lots of forests, this thing turns that city into a wild troop printing machine, because you gain extra draft per forester, and this is really a lot. So when you want to have a site where to produce massive amounts of troops, it really pays off with the barbarians to look for a city with forests, because you get a huge payoff here. You only invest 100 gold for a lot of draft. That's all. When you look at all the other options here, the blacksmith sure is also only 100 gold for a 20 draft, but the blacksmith only offers you draft, whereas the Forest of Stakes does demoralize the enemy, gives you food and production, and on top of that the draft. So and to add on all of these things, you can of course add the blacksmith to the Forest of Stakes. That's when really you can churn out units like crazy. Add that Shrine of the Wargod I talked about before, and that city is wild. So number 7, let's talk about defensive needs. So your roster is really good at many things, but it's really bad at one thing, and that's soaking up blows. That comes due to several reasons. So, this is a bloated roster, this city I wanted. So your base roster, your most defensive piece in your roster is the warrior, and he's a tier 1 unit. He is amazing at what he does. He can stun people, he is pretty fairly resilient, but he has, for one, no magic resistance whatsoever, and for another thing, he's after all only a tier 1 unit, so his resistances and his HP aren't the highest per se. So it goes all up the line. We don't get anything defensive after that, except for the War Shaman, but he surely will tank nothing. And then the Berserker. He is fairly hard to kill, but being a shock unit means he has no extra defensive spice on himself, except for that Berserker's Rage. That's not really something which makes the Berserker unit harder to kill in terms of damage mitigation, and that's why supporting is really, really important for these guys. So the bottom line of this point is try to get yourself at least one higher tiered defensive unit, be it something out of the tomes. Here, for example, I'm researching the Iron Golem because that's just one massively nice way to solve the entire problem. And the other thing, I already pointed out towards the Tome of Warding, there are really nice ways to get that resistance on your troops dirty cheap. Tome of Warding is one of my absolute favorites because it has a lot of synergy with the Barbarian Culture on its own. Magical wards go so good, Staves of Warding go so good, Mark of Invulnerability for the Berserker Cheese, and with that you have the ability to use your native War Shaman units. You know, you get a 1 hex AoE magic resistance bonus. That's pretty big, and either way, count in some defensive measures. Whatever you do, I'd recommend you to put at least one tome with strong defensive options into your build. Your battlefield efficiency will benefit a lot from that. So, number 8. I want to talk a little bit about outposting and what you can do with that. So, in this world here, most of the world has been claimed already. But when you are going with those scout raiding parties I was talking about, you should always keep an eye out for these magic material thingies. So with a decent raiding party, it is fairly easily possible to knock open these magic material nodes, and then you just build an outpost either on top of them or right next to them. So on top of them goes the outpost if you actually only want that magic material and you never want to make it a city on your own. Then you just claim it, build a nice palisade wall on top of that, and then you just consider for yourself how hard you want to defend it, depending on where it is. And if you want to make it a city, the outpost goes right next to that, because then you can just expand the city's domain into that magic material and build a conduit or a research post on top of that. If you'd be building the city on top of that, you'd be missing out on this, and it's really a waste because conduits and research posts are darned valuable. So altogether, when you're outposting magic materials like that, this by the way works the best the bigger the world is, you can just get yourself access to these things fairly easy. And the moment the AI decides to go wild on your little outpost thing, this is an option for you to just attack them on the other end of the map, because you know where their armies are at. So after adding in palisades, they also have to siege that thing for a few turns, so it's really, really massive. Especially in PvP, it's a real pain in the rear, because people want those magic materials. Everybody wants them. Don't bother outposting for smaller things, because the outposts from the scouts are fairly costly. Now then, number 9. I need to talk about here about another problem, and that's the fact that we are one swarmy bunch, and being swarmy means always high upkeeps. So if you rely on your baseline roster or summon units either way, you'll spend a lot of money. So I personally fell in love with opting into the Chaos Tree in that regard, because you can cut down the unit upkeep here. Prolific Swarmers does a hell of a job as well. It's a cultural trait, cutting down the unit's upkeep as well. And you can also go for Shadow for magic origin unit upkeep reduction, and no, Astral doesn't offer anything here. So these are some options that you could always go for and should go for. And another thing, how to upkeep your entire thing: go deeper into chaos and wage war, pillage, and sap the money out of your enemies. This is really one amazing way to go for the barbarians. They have a natural affinity towards chaos, and if you make it towards the really deep ranks here, raising cities even gives you permanent gold income, and yeah, Your upkeep is one of your biggest enemies with these guys because you want to print out armies a lot. You can use throwaway armies so well, like that's low tier units throwing at high tier armies of the enemy to just put a big dent into them before you send your own main doom stack. This all costs money, and focusing on your money gain and the unit upkeep reduction is one of the most important things when you're playing barbarians, because this is actually your weak spot. So, number 10, that's the last thing I want to talk about here, is consider bringing magic damage. Your roster is very, very physical front-loaded. You have access to the Primal Strike, which gives you blight damage on your first melee damage, but you are totally bound to blight damage. So if the enemy is fairly resistant to that, you won't get too much magical damage to stick to them. You don't have many alternatives here, so all in all, you cannot even shake down the enemy's resistances too well, so you can go two ways with that. Either you ignore the fact that you lack damage diversity and you just buff up your troops, and you remember yourself to strip buffs from the enemy and strip their defenses. That works well too. Or you just go with the tomes and you add in some pyromancy, or, you know, there are so many options to add in some elemental damage in these books that you really don't need to worry too much about it. But I felt like diversifying your damage portfolio is really, really a good thing for the barbarians, because if you ever happen to run into folks that can shake off physical damage and blight damage really well, and if you don't have any defense shredding measures there, stuff gets pretty hard pretty quickly. I mean, luckily we do have a little bit of access to stuff like the War Shaman's strengthening bonus, and the Berserkers have innate frenzy, so they go stronger the more often they attack, but it really pays off to diversify yourself a little bit so you don't get outplayed that easily. Also, you lack battle mages altogether in your roster, so you might want to fix that too. Like I said, there's several ways of tackling that problem, but tackle that problem you should. So, thanks for watching this video. I'm pretty sure that there would be more than 10 things to say about what you can go for with the barbarians. I really admire the wonderful ideas that you guys put down in the comment section, so keep them going. I really, really appreciate it. We all learn a lot by that, and leave a thumbs up or consider subscribing. I'd be delighted to have you as well. And there's a playlist link down there for all the Age of Wonders 4 info videos I made, so if you feel like binging a little bit more of that stuff, off you go. Hope you have a nice day, and see you next time.